Welcome to today's podcast. Thanks for joining us here at Test, Optimize, and Scale. Lucky enough to have CEO of Melrose PR, Kelley Weaver, in the studio today, host of Crypto Token Talk, thought leader in the blockchain and PR space, been involved with projects that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars. Thanks for being here with us today.
Jason, such a pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. And as you know, on the show, we like to talk about projects you've worked on, what the audience can do to test, optimize, and scale their projects. But really just want to get started with you, your story. How did you get involved in PR? How are you here in the blockchain space today?
So PR is a little bit more obvious. I fell in love with it in college and really found it as my dream career. I've always loved consuming media in one way or another, specifically at that time, magazines, like reading physical magazines, thought it was like the perfect industry for me. So I, took a job straight out of college at a PR firm, worked at a couple different, big, small, mostly in the lifestyle arena. And I worked at a boutique agency and really thought, I feel like I could do this myself. So I ended up leaving that agency and it wasn't an immediate jump, but within like 6 months, I decided, I really have nothing to lose. I was 24 years old at the time and launched what is now Melrose PR. So it started off as a lifestyle PR agency and I, had amassed clients through, word of mouth and, basically I was doing freelance PR and then thought, why don't I just slap a business name on this, and call it Melrose PR and make it official. And it grew really fast. We were in the lifestyle arena for a long time, restaurants, some hotels, consumer products, little fun. So I'm very much consumer facing, that's sort of my comfort zone. I do not consider myself to be a technical person at all. In fact, I really shied away from tech for a really long time because I thought, I don't know. I can't even understand. How can I promote or, communicate this?
Sure.
Cut to a few years into that, we were doing a lot of events and I launched a little side project called Purse Case. This is fun for the entrepreneurs in the room that I ended up, I was on Shark Tank with my co-founder. We, did very well with that company, ended up selling the business a few years ago. And right around the time that we sold Purse Case was when I was really putting all my emphasis back into Melrose PR. And I had been kind of navigating through those years because we launched in 2012, Melrose PR, beginning of 2012. So it's almost, this January it'll be 8 years old, the company. But this is, I think beginning of 2016 was when this transition happened where we sold Purse Case. And an advisor had been like, you really should look in your backyard. We were in Santa Monica and there's Silicon Beach, all these startups sprouting, really cool tech companies. And advisor was like, you really got to look at these. I think there's a real opportunity for you. And I was like, maybe we could do events or something along those lines. That was my comfort zone around tech.
Right.
Well, got introduced to 2 different clients, one of whom actually was right down the street from here in Playa Vista, a service as a software company. But one was GEM, which is at the time a enterprise blockchain solutions provider. So they were working with companies like Capital One and Toyota on the supply chain side and Philips in the healthcare space using blockchain technology for pilots and programs to test how the tech could help them, with their existing legacy systems. Well, this team, GEM, was so fun, so cool. The buzz around it was so infectious that I was just, me and my team were like, this is so cool. We love this tech thing. Like, this is way more exciting than we thought. Furthermore, when I'd been navigating looking for a niche, I really felt like we had landed in the blockchain space because there were only so many reporters covering the industry at the time. Right. So we really could get to know them all personally, and really well. And as you know, probably the business of PR is largely centered around relationships.
Yes. Establishing those connections. Yes.
Exactly. So when we went to a couple of conferences nationally with the GEM team, that's when I was like, kind of had my aha moment, like there's a real opportunity here because there were teams who sent, like a couple of representatives from like Asia to be there, like handing out some brochures, but really they were like, in terms of what they were actually building and doing, world-changing stuff, really cool stuff. their ability to communicate what they were doing, like that's where I really saw an opportunity.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I landed in the blockchain sector.
Mm-hmm.
And so we rebranded and we said we're all blockchain. And over a period of about 3 or 4 months, we kind of phased out our non-blockchain clients and really made it our intention to be all crypto, all blockchain.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was beginning of 2017. And as you know from the timeline of the ICO craze,
Yes,
we were sort of in the right place at the right time when that all happened. And the first ICO that we took on, I really thought, this is going to be an experiment. I don't know if we can be aligned with any kind of fundraising project, but we can do brand building. Mm-hmm. We can help them obviously with their PR, content marketing, things like that. And so, again, I've always been sort of scrappy and like, okay, let's roll up our sleeves and see where this takes us. If this is a mistake, let's figure it out. And so that really led, that spiraled from there, like where the first ICO we took on raised 15 million in like less than a minute. And, it was it wasn't early per se, but it was early enough that it caught attention and people were like, wow, what is this? Who are these, Melrose PR people and what do they do? And at the time we were one of, only a handful of service providers who were really experienced in the blockchain sector. So
yeah. And actually delivering.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
but bear in mind, things were easier then. Like hosting an ICO was news, right?
Yes.
Because there weren't so many.
Yes.
So
that's the headline right there.
There's your news hook. Like very quickly that became not news. And also bear in mind, crypto was having a moment. We were talking about Bitcoin at the end of 2016 was like maybe $900. Then in May of that year, I was at the Consensus conference and like we hit, I don't know, 2,000, 2,500.
Yeah.
And Ether was like the outlier too. It was like 13 at the beginning of the year. And then it was like, maybe hit 200 or 400 around that time. Mm-hmm. Anyway, things were just going bananas.
Unheard of numbers. Everything's growing. You feel it everywhere around you.
Yeah.
And thank you for getting into the background of your story there. I love it. Entering the PR world, building your own shop after having a strong understanding of the game, building, case studies and, different performance to point out in various industries, selling your company, having a successful exit, and then being introduced to the blockchain space. And have to ask, how do you, raise $15 million in 1 minute? And given it's 2017, how does something like that even occur?
It was 2017. I mean, I will say that much, so it wouldn't happen today. But that was not the most, or the fastest that we pulled off. But that was the first. And a combination of things. I think people were really interested in these tokens because at that point they had a cap, and so as soon as they would hit the exchange, there was almost always like a giant increase, and so there was just this frenzy of as long as people knew that the ICO was, we're talking, this private is weird sale, days. Like, as long as they knew that it was happening, they were like, let me get my hands on these so I can then, buy them, dump them, make a quick buck, So this was not, I don't know. There were some really interesting projects that we aligned ourselves. There was also some where we, it became very quickly after that, when the inbound started to become crazy. This is interesting from an entrepreneur's perspective as a service provider. We'd always been mostly word of mouth was how we always built our business from the beginning.
Referrals, introductions.
Yeah, case studies. People saw what we were doing for others, and so that's how this did go crazy during that time period. But because there was such an influx of, I want to launch an ICO. There's that meme with the cat that was like, I'm going to launch an ICO.
His was successful though.
That was what was going on. And so we had to create all these sales funnels because all of a sudden we're almost sitting like a VC where it's like, people are pitching us for us to take them on. Which was just a crazy moment in time. And I really felt like something was happening. Like at some point, this is going to be like a book or a movie or whatever. This couldn't be real and it couldn't go on forever. But we definitely, we tried to align ourselves with the top projects that seemed to actually have some sort of promise
Mm-hmm.
or have what's the best way to put this? Like the right team and,
Technology, tokenomics, they had a
to actually
direction that people wanted to be
execute.
part of that momentum.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. So anyway, it was a wild time. I mean, for sure. And, in terms of scaling, like we had to, we had to be really selective on what we were going to take on.
Yes.
Because it also felt like, how did we go from representing consumer products, that don't speak back to like all of a sudden fundraising campaigns.
Yeah.
And so we've always been very firm on, we're not going to promote anything about the actual offering itself. We're really going to help you tell your story and build your brand and your awareness. Build thought leadership amongst the team members. So helping them to get bylines and, quotes in articles on TV as thought leaders. That's what we're doing, as opposed to, hey, there's this token offering coming up in September, get in now sort of thing. That was more on the marketing side, for newsletters and things like that. But we really steered clear of that for, concerns over regulation and things like that.
Smart.
So, yeah.
Smart. A lot of fake stuff going on at that time.
Oh,
it was
for
great
sure.
to distance yourself and your clients from it.
I mean, it was unfortunately, I feel like honestly, it was impossible to be immune, but we did try to be as selective as possible. And there were a couple instances where we had to break away from projects. Like we got going with them and then we actually had to like fire them as a client because it just didn't feel like something we wanted to align ourselves with. Furthermore, think about, like what I mentioned earlier, PR is all about relationships. You got to maintain your relationships with the reporters. If you're representing all these scammy projects, forget it.
Mm-hmm. I picture good PR as someone who could pick up the phone, call their friends who are writers and publishers at the biggest, titles in the space. So don't want to affect those channels.
It's all relationships. Like I'm having lunch with my friend who works at Bloomberg tomorrow. Like just to catch up and see how he's doing. He's working on a book about Ethereum, and I'm going to fill him in on some stuff that I've been seeing. So that's the kind of relationship that you want to have.
Built on integrity, built on good projects together.
No specific reason to get together other than, here's what I'm seeing, here's what you're seeing, how can I help you, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember getting some questionable inquiries back then, having to do diligence. And like you mentioned, acting more like a VC of which projects do we want to put our name on?
Right.
Is this, a gray area? Could we end up in danger by being part of it?
Right. I mean, it was weird times where nobody knew really what was happening. Everyone felt like it was going to come to an end at some point, which is why there was this frenzy of need it yesterday, let's get going now. It was wild. It was wild. But, we survived. We, did fairly well. We were able to maintain our reputation, which was probably the toughest thing to do during that time. And, I guess I'm trying to think of the timeline. So that was, end of 2017, things cooled off a little bit. 2018, things started to cool off, but the majority, I mean, I will say still in 2018, we're still having to do a lot of due diligence.
But SDOs became more of a thing.
Yes.
Working with different groups in the financial sector. There's more legitimacy around projects. Not the same hype, but private investors are participating in early stage rounds.
Yes, exactly. And blockchain infrastructure projects, things to do with like mining, hardware wallets, storage, security, things like that. You know, all of the things that are going to help us get there. Because I will be honest, I mentioned I'm not technical. When Jem was talking about these healthcare use cases that I just thought were like no-brainers. I truly believe that, 3.5 years ago or whatever, almost 4, that we would have these, like our healthcare records on the blockchain by now in 2019. I just had no awareness of how long this stuff takes.
Right.
And, it's a lot longer than people realize. It's a lot harder to make these things a reality. Now, do I believe that this will come to fruition in our future? We'll be using blockchain in a lot of different ways, and we probably won't even know that that's what's happening, but it'll be a more efficient system. Yes. But, we're still not there yet. And now I have a lot more awareness about how long it takes, where we are in sort of the life cycle. And I think
adoption. Yeah.
And I will say my faith in the industry has been renewed because there has been a quiet period where it's been, I think only the strong have kind of toughed through and are continuing to show up and do the work. And for that reason, we're seeing a lot less of the, fluff and people out there for the wrong reasons, because honestly, the wrong reasons were, I think it can make a quick buck. And the reality is that's not the case. It never really has been the case, but it also, there just isn't that amount of funding being thrown around at this point in time. So the projects that I'm hearing from now are a lot more, I'm having to do a lot less hardcore due diligence, because it's so obvious that they, for example, the resumes are like MIT, Stanford, it's not like, a bunch of kids in a basement thinking, let's throw something together and put a white paper up and get a PR firm. It's, tech that's built now. And, we're now in, beta. And so it's been pretty exciting. I mean, I will say I'm waiting for it to get, I will say the VC funding, every now and then I hear about projects, getting some rounds, but it's been quiet for longer than I thought it would be. And I think the overall crypto market is kind of a reflection of that. I think that if Bitcoin has another run here at any point in time, or picks up some momentum, which it has slowly over the course of the last year, I think that will impact us all. And there will be a renewed sort of, it's interesting because all of the crypto market is really driven by the retail investors. And so when there's an overall consumer interest, there's also this, I feel like, I don't know, but I feel like there's, some fear of missing out amongst the, the financiers or, folks who are pouring money into these startups of this is how I want to be involved in the blockchain sector,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I see it reflected when the market goes up. Our phone starts ringing more, overall interest, and not just from prospective clients, but also from groups in the space, definitely the financiers as well too. That being said, it is refreshing to see the long-term mentality in marketing and business plans today from groups that we're looking to align ourselves with, from the MIT type engineers on projects versus the groups that are telling us how much they're going to raise, how quick.
Right. You're right. I haven't had those conversations in a while, which is nice.
Less Lamborghinis, more long-term.
We're going to be conservative. We're going to cap it at 75 million.
I know.
Really good for you.
Yes. I remember groups being unimpressed with $5 to $10 million raises we had done. SEC regulated some of the equity crowdfunding portals, but saying, oh, that's nothing. We can do that, in 30 minutes. But talking more about historical seed capital and even A rounds and how this evolves, and not wanting to do a down round later on. So it's nice to see the stability that it is even occurring when things slow down a bit here. And when it comes to PR and getting into the test optimized scale section a bit, what do you recommend when you're speaking with a group who's putting their marketing plan together, or even a marketing director who's looking to try out something new and maybe take it back to the fundamentals? Is it the press releases? Is it building relationships long term and then going for an ask later on? What have you really seen work? What have you advised on other groups?
So both of the things that you mentioned, for sure. We call it kind of a multi-pronged approach, and we talk a lot about the snowball effect with our clients. You don't want to say no even to some smaller things that might have a niche audience, because it can lead, you kind of want to build that brand awareness or thought leadership, unless you have, some kind of resume or awareness from some prior thing. You really, the team members, you want to make sure that people have heard of you and are seeing you, here, there, and everywhere. So there's kind of, we're building these brands. So yes, relationships are key, and they're going to lead to, bigger features. Now we're up against some, because of these frothy times that we've talked about, the press are very skeptical, totally understandable. Why wouldn't they be? They were burned too in a lot of cases, right?
Attacked when a project didn't go right, having audiences say they were involved in it, or even to those extents.
So we're, very much, I didn't mention this, but now, or maybe I did, but we're all blockchain and crypto. That's all we do. So in terms of the types of reporters that we're talking to every day, largely those who are also all crypto, all blockchain, but also business, tech, fintech, when there's specific industry verticals like ad tech or healthcare or whatever, we're, talking to them as well, solar and green and whatever. So It's specific to the client, but building those relationships, offering up our clients, the folks along on these teams for expert commentary. So getting them quoted in articles that are already going up. So that could be about things that are unrelated to the project, or, I wouldn't say unrelated, but parallel, or, but basically building credibility and thought leadership, helping to tell your audience that you have a voice and that you have an opinion, and that this is how you're thinking about things. So that's one way to build trust with the reporters. And that often leads to, when they're writing a story, or maybe they're thinking about you, they're going to incorporate you into these longer feature stories. But I will say, features are kind of few and far between at this point among stories. It's almost more interesting when they're talking about trend pieces, or, about, a story about the healthcare sector, for example, and mentioning a few different, service providers, as opposed to just one highlight article. It depends on the news. So we're also working with the clients to create a timeline of news, whether there's like new hires, whether there's fundraising rounds being closed, whether there's partnership announcements with, household name companies. The same goes for if there's a headlining investor. So things like that are all newsworthy, and are obviously using press releases too. Press releases are sort of like the last line of defense when it comes to news. You typically want to have the press release ready to go with the news. And then we will, reach out to our Rolodex of contacts, or, specific people that we think would be interested in that news, and offer them the news, a little bit early under embargo. So, hey, this news is going live next week on Tuesday, but I wanted you to have it first in case you wanted to get on the phone and do an interview with our client so-and-so.
Yes.
And then on that Tuesday, we'll put it out. We use PR Web, so it's a newswire service. We have really good results with them, and that's usually it's good for SEO. I would say it's rare that reporters are just looking through the wire for news stories, but I will say it actually has happened in the past 6 months a couple times where they've seen a press release and written a story. So it can happen, but really it's just like a way to tell Google about your news, or announce it in a formal way that you can then share on LinkedIn and other channels. And, that brings up a point a little bit off topic, but, once you get these press hits, even if it's just a quote, we encourage all of our clients to be sharing them on social channels, because you might have the eyeballs of the audience of Forbes who's reading the article, but, maybe they haven't seen that. And maybe it's a lot about validation and credibility, right? So you want to be sharing and letting people within your network know, hey, I was just quoted in Forbes. I was, Cointelegraph wrote a story about our company, or, so there's exponentially more eyeballs that'll see that if you obviously share that content and also put it on your website,
Yes. And are you seeing more success from the crypto, blockchain, endemic publishers, the Cointelegraphs, and there's about a couple hundred others, right, with 20 main sites, or tech sectors of Forbes, Business Insider, Inc., type publishers and sites?
It's both, but we are really well connected in the crypto space, for sure. So I think they're reaching out to us, like we're getting inbound. Hey, do you have anyone who can comment on X, Y, or Z? So that's happening a lot. But that's specific to us, just because that's where a lot of our relationships lie. But we also have relationships in the tech space too. So. It's both. I will say, you reminded me of something actually, which is that these crypto sites have gotten a lot easier to work with. When things were frothy, your Cointelegraphs were like, that'll be $20,000 for that article.
And I was going to ask about that next.
Those days are over. Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Particularly when you have some breaking news, something that they authentically should be covering.
They cover it. It's
and they throw you a rate card and say, here's what it looks like.
That doesn't happen anymore. It really doesn't. In fact, that has rarely happened anymore. And maybe that's because of who we are, and so they don't.
I was going to mention that too. Yeah.
But that doesn't happen anymore, and we are getting a lot more. I think because it's slower times. It's like survival mode for everybody, or everybody's just in build mode, I will say, and so everybody's just doing what they can to like maintain the the reputation of the overall industry, the industry at large.
Yeah.
So we're all just doing our bit. And I think there's, a lot less of that, thank goodness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I remember it was all pay to play, at least felt
Oh
like
gosh,
at
I
one
know.
point.
It was really, that was tough for businesses like ours because it was, why would you come to us if you could just pay for this stuff? But then it was said sponsored, or, sometimes there was this gray area where it didn't say sponsored, and we just, tried to avoid all of that because it's I don't know. You have to operate with integrity, I think,
Yes. And I found it's best to go with the experts like yourself. We're having these conversations every day, have the relationships. You guys probably got more premium placements, better pricing, better experience overall for the client. And it's great to hear that it's no longer strictly pay to play.
I mean, there was only a few different partners where we felt like there was value in their sponsored channels that said sponsored, like, Bitcoin Magazine and a few others that we felt like there was enough, and we could get preferential rates for the clients and things like that. But to be honest, we haven't done that in a little while, only because we're getting placements anyway. And that leads me to one thing that we're doing that is new as of about 12 or 18 months, which is we write a lot of content for our clients. We find that you have to tell the story that you want to see in the press. I know you do a lot of content marketing for your clients as well. It is so effective, I think, in terms of, really showing what you believe in, what you're thinking about. This is not directly promotional stuff. We're talking about showing how you think about certain issues and problems and stuff like that. So, we're helping our clients ideate, thought leadership topics. And then we've developed, a whole bunch of distribution channels where we pitch, byline topic ideas, or sometimes the full written article to our, partners' channels. And then they'll say, yeah, I'm interested in publishing that.
Oh yeah.
It's not as easy as you think. You think, oh yeah, they want, they want the free content. It still takes, some pitching and some discussions with the editors and things like that. But we have landed a number of byline articles. And the best part of that is, like, in the bio is where you get the recognition for you and your company, and, it says, so-and-so is CEO of yada, yada. And then you can click through to learn more. And it's usually a topic that is related to some problem that they're solving with their company. And that has been really effective, and a great shareable piece. And, again, not paid.
Yep.
But
not advertorial. It's sharing a real, opinion on something with the experience.
Yeah. I mean, and then we've also seen the rise of like self-publishing content channels. Like Medium is a really effective, great place to publish stuff. Even like a press release, if you want to go out without the wire, like that's kind of a tip or a hack. It's like you can put out news on Medium and it will get attention.
Yeah.
Google, looks at it. Another one is LinkedIn, publishing pieces on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Great option, for, when you're scrappy and building. Like, these are all things that you can do yourself.
Reddit, other channels like that for publishing too?
So we do a little bit of Reddit, like seeding, sometimes, or like Ask Me Anythings, things like that. We did
AMAs. Yeah.
And, we don't do that much of the community and social now. Okay. We're really strong in the content writing and PR and relationships. So sometimes we'll do that as kind of an add-on with a third party that we've used many times that we really like. But, and it can be effective to, like, help drive people to these pieces of content that we're building for you, and landing. But mostly we're using Medium, companies on blogs, PR web, and then distribution channels that I mentioned.
Sure. And then having clients kind of manage their community channels. And I've seen some of them to be hit or miss anyway. I've seen very large Telegram channels that have produced very little, given in 2018, 2019. But that makes sense. The focus is more on those high quality type publisher relationships. Well, that's why I wonder about that, because for a while it was like vanity metrics, like you had to have a certain number of Telegram users in order to be... Part of the valuation.
Yeah. And now I think it's steering away from that. So I don't really know that I can put a direct, kind of ROI on building your Telegram. I think it's more like a customer support chat.
Yep.
So it's a great place to see these articles too, and building that. But I think that that's better suited for, it really depends on the type of project. It really depends on what your goals are, who your audience is.
Absolutely. What about influencers across any of these channels? Have they been good to work with in terms of getting the message out?
For sure. And again, when things were like frothy, it was harder, but now that things have cooled off a bit, we have really great relationships with some great influencers like Michael Nye, like
Yes.
Anthony Pompliano, like, podcasters who, do great things. And then we've, worked with them for sideline events and hosting gigs and things like that. And they're really effective because they really have a great following. And we're talking not just, the US market, but like Asia and different regions where they really have like, significant following and influence. And that can be great. And that's why one of the reasons I mentioned the snowball effect is like, you never want to dismiss a podcast or something small, because it could lead to something, I don't know. You never know that your buddy at Bloomberg might be listening to that podcast, to get their news. So everything kind of leads to overall brand awareness. And if you try not to scoff at the little stuff, that can be, that could be helpful.
Okay. And you mentioned international a bit there. Can you touch on that? Do you get requests on global specific regions, maybe 5 markets to start? Does a lot of your business exclude US investors if it's a fundraise focused project, or even just excluding US users? Can you speak to the geo-targeting a bit?
Sure. So we're more in the overall brand building space as opposed to, your business where you can actually like hone in on different targets. Our area of expertise is English speaking reporters and outlets. So, and that's really the extent of our reach, unfortunately, because that's, our team is all English speaking. So we're working with reporters in, largely in the US, many in Europe. As it relates to, fundraising and excluding the US or, targeting certain geographic markets, we do work with different clients who have different needs in those ways. Mm-hmm. What I usually say though, is it really doesn't matter as it relates to us because, you're building overall brand awareness, right? And brand equity and, sentiment around your company.
Things to point at.
Right.
If nothing else. And
right.
Yeah.
So, and I will say that like the Chinese market, Russian market, a lot of these publications will syndicate from what they're seeing in the English speaking publications. It's
Exactly.
like first seen on CoinDesk and then seen other places,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think for what we do, it's not so important to be, and we have worked with other agencies who are stronger with publications in Asia, for example, or in, certain places in the Middle East. Like if there's a real specific need for that, mm-hmm. but we kind of stick with what we're good at, which is, the English speaking markets, which I will say is kind of like the leader, and then everything kind of goes.
Follows.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I've seen that too, and that makes perfect sense there. What type of timeline do you paint the picture for when mapping this out with clients? What's the overall process and when they could begin seeing traction, if any?
Yeah, great question. And as a service provider, it's always like the first question that anybody asks is like, when can this, when can we
do
expect
this tomorrow
to see results? Yeah. So there is an onboarding process that we've really streamlined because clients do want to see stuff quickly. And I will say it has gotten faster because we've not just the onboarding, but I mean the turnaround time for results. So we're comfortable with like a 3-month engagement because we know that by, month 2, we're usually like really cranking in terms of getting them here, there, and everywhere. So what it looks like when you first engage is like, we'll have, our team read all of the materials provided, they kind of like dump everything on us. And we come prepared with an agenda that has all the questions that we need to ask about like, one, who's going to answer certain types of questions, like what are your target markets, what are your goals, what are your dream publications, et cetera. We'll ask all the questions that we need. Then we take, we make it like within 7 days. So we'll have the first call on Monday. This is when we'll gather all this information. And then by the following Monday, we're delivering what we call a marketing plan, which basically is an outline of our strategy for the following like 3, 6, or 9 months, typically. Mm-hmm. That outlines, it has a boilerplate. So at the bottom of every press release, there's what's called a boilerplate, which is like basically concrete messaging about the company that's going to be used over and over that everybody agrees on. Different topics, messaging, points that we want to use over and over and reiterate in all of our marketing. Mm-hmm. What op-ed topics we're going to go out with, timeline of announcements. So if there's any like fundraising milestones coming up, if there's any partnerships, if there's any new hires, things like that are coming up that we can use as leverage. And it'll outline all of that. And then our goal is to get sign off on that second call from the team members like, hey, we know that Melrose understands us inside and out, and they can go, to their list of contacts with that information. And, and we feel good about what they're going to say on our behalf, right? Because you're like really having to trust us with that. And then we use,
You're the voice.
Yeah. We use, channels like Slack and other tools to like be in touch with our clients consistently, because the turnaround time for some of these quote opportunities is really quick. So we got to be in constant communication, but that's usually how we sort of onboard, and it's pretty streamlined. And then, hopefully by that seventh day, like we're hitting the ground running with our outreach and executing on that plan that we delivered.
And you're mentioning 6 months, 9 months on top of the 3. How often are you putting together content calendars or publishing schedules or different stories like that? Is it more of a 7-day, a 30-day, or is it evolving as it's going along for the most part?
What do you mean, week to week in terms of
like a content calendar, or overall, like how does the messaging change week to week, month to month, or is it usually pushing a certain narrative and then reconfiguring from there?
So it really depends, but I think every week we're going out with a different like angle or story, or like to have deliverables every week, because, we have a call every week and we're talking to them all the time. So we want to have something to show for it.
New angle every week.
Typically.
Okay.
I mean,
got it.
Just about.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes that's a little bit of overkill. So maybe every couple of weeks, but at least a piece of content every week, so if it's not an angle, it's an op-ed.
Okay.
Or there's this going on in the news and we're going to piggyback on that news because we think that there's an opportunity to tie in. Being
able to use the relevancy there.
Totally.
And, moving to the optimized part of it, what do you do when it's not working? And I mean, even if you had an example to share of a project that wasn't getting traction, you changed around a few things, maybe something happened in the news, and then it turned everything around.
I think you're right in that it's really like having to be nimble, maybe pulling in a different team member who's like better suited to answer different topics. We can like talk to the CTO as opposed to the CEO, or use different individuals, because a lot of the times the individuals within the organizations are the vehicles to get the news out, right? If they're byline articles or they're, quoted, trying to basically like host a, all-man brainstorm where what angles can we create here? Or what are we seeing? Like, what is the pushback? What is the feedback? Like, why is this not working? And I mean, typically we have really consistent, happy clients. I mean, most of our engagements now do start off at the 3-month mark, just because people are wary and want to, walk before they run. And a lot of our clients end up, with us for a year plus in terms of, like once it rolls month to month, because we're consistently delivering. And I think one of the things that sets us apart is we really understand the need for content. And so we're putting out content, we're telling the story that they want to see, as opposed to sitting back and waiting for the articles to be generated by, our relationships, which happens as well. It just sometimes isn't on the timeline that you had hoped.
Absolutely. And it's huge, by the way. I mean, we've heard stories. I've been the client at brands in the past where we've had PR agencies that you don't sure what they're actually doing or not doing any given week. So the fact that you're putting new content together, showing new angles and going after new targets each week immediately sets you apart. And then, of course, the track record you guys are putting together. And I just like asking about the optimization piece, because I've seen brands think everything in their marketing plan is just going to work right out of the gate. And I've found marketing abilities are often best measured when things aren't working. What occurs in those calls, what really changes stuff up. So it sounds like you guys have been able to, align with different team members, bring out a different message from there, and be relentless in terms of what are we going to do to, be able to get that validation for clients from publishers in a 3-month span.
I think transparency is key, and showing what you're doing to, provide value. Sometimes we get scrappy and like we'll help the clients put together like an event or, a panel or, even like an investor dinner or some way that we're continuing to add value and engage the reporters, because you can invite people to these things and stuff like that. So I think as long as you're delivering consistent value and really thinking, from the client standpoint, what are their goals and how are we going to help them get there?
Mm-hmm.
And that can be a number of different ways, but being scrappy, being willing to pivot, and being transparent about what it is that you're doing, who you've reached out to, what the feedback's been. I will say, I'll say this, but delivering negative feedback, not my favorite thing, but like really important in the grand scheme.
Mm-hmm.
We've done that, like we had a project that we aligned ourselves or that we're working with now that recently had, a very thoughtful YouTuber kind of like break down the project. And it was like the overall sentiment was quite negative, but really thoughtfully done and compatible. So we had a call with our clients about like, okay, how can we specifically address all of these concerns and get this out there? And we're going to, it hasn't been done yet, but we're going to actually invite the YouTuber to have a discussion with the team members, like addressing some of these concerns. And then we're going to update the white paper. We're going to update the FAQs because these questions are coming up and they're valid, right? So, sometimes it's like you said, like the negative stuff that gets you to the good stuff, and pokes holes in, okay, well, we obviously need to be more clear in this way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, breakdowns can lead to breakthroughs in that way. And I get it. I get the passion in what you're saying. And I look for that in our clients, in entrepreneurs, that the word I use is grit, where like whatever it takes, they're going to get there. And the fact that you're building these plans to say, hey, something's going to happen in between here, but we're going to get them to their goal. That's what we're doing with them. Makes all the difference. So it's great to hear that, and particularly in the optimization section. And into scale, you've obviously been part of very large projects. What have you been able to do to watch projects scale to the greatest levels? Is it getting coverage from one place, and as you mentioned, sharing that coverage with more second tier or second market publishers? What can entrepreneurs, what can marketing directors do to scale their project to the next levels?
So I think it's kind of two things that I've seen that the key ingredients that the teams that have done really well have. And one is the ability to, manage multiple moving parts and, manage a team really well. And having that kind of leadership skill, I think, is something that we probably, can't really help with, but like is critical as it relates to these companies being able to scale. Like the people within the organization are everything. And, communication with us as well as with each other is really key. The other ingredient, which is more relating to what we're doing, is like the ability to be open mind and make time, because it's not an overnight thing, brand building and PR. One podcast, maybe a half an hour, but I ultimately, as long as their audience is suited for what you're trying to reach, if there's some audience, like maybe it's only like 500 people, but it's like 500 of the right people, that can lead to other things. And so I think the ability to be open-minded about like, yes, we're going to do that, because we've had a challenge with some clients where they just want the Wall Street journals and they just want the New York Times, and they're willing to wait for us to get there. And they're not willing to, be in the smaller publications. And that poses a challenge for us and for them. Sometimes you can start big and then it trickles down, the top-down approach. But more often than not, we're seeing where it's like a overall brand building, snowball strategy, where like you're bundling all of these different things together. And, sometimes we'll use quotes from past articles in our pitches to land those bigger things. And the larger, more mainstream publications want to see that there's some kind of proven track record, or that these, that there's some credibility from the founding team. So, the ability to be open-minded, put in the time, and sort of trust us when we're telling you it's worth your time, because we're obviously going to screen that stuff. That is, a key ingredient to being effective. But I still think that the communication piece is probably the most important.
Oh yeah, it's one of our company values. It's what I see fall apart in the agency-client relationship, let alone client-publisher relationship or client-community relationship. Communication comes first there, and communicating early at that.
Yeah, we had a situation with a client just last week where we had a press release good to go. We had offered, like I mentioned earlier, you seed it to the reporters first. They're interested. Great. Hey, Melrose PR, I don't think that we're going to be able to, if we have a big spike in traffic, we're not going to be able to handle it. Like, can we postpone? And we were just like, oh no, we have all these reporters on the hook. I don't know. And we were able to kind of reframe it where, probably shouldn't even share this, but where they are launching a new feature. So we were like, hey, to the reporters, can we wait until we launch this new feature for the news to go live? Like, would it be okay if we bought ourselves a week? It ended up being okay, but that was a really, that really put us in a challenging position where, like, could have jeopardized the relationships, could have jeopardized the news in general, but like being ahead of that stuff and thinking through that before we're ready to go is a communication thing.
Absolutely. And all part of the adventure, right?
Sure, exactly.
People ask me, what's the most important thing about marketing? And it's really those conversations of, okay, this happened. How do we flip this around and make it valuable for everyone involved?
Yeah.
So that's great to hear. And where do you see everything going in the industry? I mean, blockchain, cryptocurrency has obviously changed a lot here in 2019. Mm-hmm. We were hoping it was going to be IEOs, where there is getting traction, but not as was projected earlier in the year. We're watching bigger corporations really move adoption along, such as the Libra, with Facebook, or the JP Morgans out there. From a marketing perspective or overall just industry analysis, where do you see everything going?
So I think everything's getting there. It's very overall positive. I mentioned, or you mentioned in your intro, that I have a podcast called Crypto Token Talk, which is aimed to be like kind of a newbie-friendly on-ramp for folks to learn more. So I have really interesting conversations with people who are way smarter than I am on the podcast. And so I kind of
believe
by osmosis learn a lot, and I love doing that. For it's really a fun thing to do, is have these conversations, and it's fun to be on the other side for once. But, I think that things are we're like building out the infrastructure layers. We're really in building mode right now. There's, it's still, we forget, like, in terms of the crypto landscape, things are still early days. We still got a long way to go in terms of like, how safe it is to like store and custody of your crypto and things like that. In terms of like enterprise blockchain software, we're pretty far away from that reaching scale and being a reality. So the build, I think we're going to continue to build, and hopefully, I will say, like I mentioned, the projects that are coming to us are a lot more thoughtful in their approach. We are seeing some really smart people. I mean, one of our this company that we're working with is like, someone who really fell in love with Bitcoin and quit his job at Google to bring a Bitcoin consumer-facing product to life. And those are the type that is like renewed faith. When someone who has a family and needs a job is like willing to quit his very good job to like dedicate at least, he said, at least a year of my life to working towards really Bitcoin and like making Bitcoin better, is that's an overall good thing. So I think this isn't an overnight thing. It's we're still in the building mode, but this is going to be, this is like one of the most exciting, if not the most exciting industry to be in my humble opinion, because there is just so much cool stuff going on. There's so many intelligent people, and we're still a long ways away. So there's it's fun to see how these things are coming to life, and like I think we're learning as we go here what's needed. Better user interface. Good marketing and storytelling, but also like delivering on these products.
Oh yeah. It's fun watching where it's all going to go. I'm sure you will be part of the book or movie when it
I hope so.
is produced, talking about 2017 and onward through here. And thanks so much for being here today. This has been very exciting. Again, privileged to have you on with your whole portfolio of success. And thanks again.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kelley.